Originally a comic and now an animated show on Amazon Prime, Invincible is an amazingly unique story created by Walking Dead writer Robert Kirkman, as well as artists Cory Walker and Ryan Ottley. The Invincible series started in 2003, actually before The Walking Dead was even started, which to me is so crazy because I've never even heard of Invincible until last year. I'd found out about the Walking Dead comics very late too, but it being probably my favorite comic book series ever, I realized I had to check out Invincible too. Plus I discovered it by seeing the trailer for the animated show, so I wanted to build up the hype. The comic series was an opportunity presented by Image Comics, who Robert Kirkman has been associated with for many years now, and is now a partner of said company. Image wanted to do a superhero run, so Robert Kirkman and Cory Walker began to brainstorm ideas. They wanted to tell a teenage superhero story, very focused on family and less on the crazy origin story of the superhero and heroes in general, which is one of the things that took me by surprise when first getting into Invincible, because there's really no explanation for why there are so many superheroes, aliens, monsters, and more. They're just there and you have to deal with it, which is kind of different when compared to Marvel or DC, but it does work with the series. After several monthly issues, Cory Walker left as the artist of Invincible because he didn't enjoy the monthly routine of issues, which is when Ryan Ottley took the role of the artist for Invincible. The comics ran from 2003 to 2018, but ended off having 3 huge compendiums, about 1,000 pages each. So if you're just getting into this series now, don't worry, there's lots to take in, and I won't go into too much information in this video for anybody worried about that. I really wanted to put this video out when the show first came out, when it was super popular and coming out every week. Not that it's not talked about now, but I feel like the prime time for putting out videos is during the trending experience of something new. And even though I didn't put a video out during the hype, I'm still happy I waited until after because once the show ended, I really wanted more, and I have all the compendiums but never finished them. So after watching the first season of Invincible, I felt the need to finally finish the second and third compendiums that I got before the show's release to try and read before it came out. I read the first compendium fairly quickly, but life got busy and I didn't make any time to read the rest of the comics, so I never finished the whole series. Until the end of the show that made me want to know all about this crazy story. I started reading Invincible daily again. I finished the rest of the compendiums because the show was that good in my opinion. It got me to finish these 3 huge books of collected issues because the first season did such a good job by intriguing me with vivid characters, a fascinating and original story, during a time when superheroes are super popular, but people are also wanting originality and something new, which is why I think The Boys did so well on Amazon. Invincible became a low-key obsession for me. I loved everything about both the show and the graphic novel. It's one of those things I genuinely feel lucky to have discovered. Something I wanted to be totally invested in and know all about every aspect of it, from the making of the comics and the show to the world in which it's set. What I wanted to do with this video, no matter when it comes out, is just share my love of the story and its characters, relate to other fans, and maybe even introduce new people to it, because to me that's what's so special about these mediums, is the impact it can have on one person or even many. When it comes to adaptations, be it from comic book, novel, video game, or whatever, I always find it interesting what directly comes from the source material and what gets altered. For example, with the Invincible show, Mark Grayson, aka Invincible, has a friend in the comics named William, and a girlfriend named Amber, and these characters are in the show too, but they're different than they are in the books. In the comics, William is Mark's goofy friend who actually even dates Samantha, Adam Eve, whereas in the show, he's Mark's somewhat goofy friend who's gay. This actually ends up being the case in the comics as well, but not until much later. Amber in the comics is a white, classic, pretty girl stereotype with blonde hair, whereas in the show they changed her to a black girl with a different personality. Now I'm going to be honest, when I first see this kind of stuff, especially when it comes to movies, shows, and other media, I somewhat jump to conclusions and assume that it's all done for inclusivity purposes, and as a way to check all these boxes today. I was even a little taken aback by the changes. But I can say after watching the first season and reading all the books that the creators of the show actually did a good job with the changes they did. Whether it was done for certain reasons or not, to me the altering of these 2 specific characters was for the best. In the comics, to me, both William and Amber are boring, unlikable filler characters that are only there because it's natural for a character from the early 2000s stories to have a silly best bud, and for the main character to also have an attractive blonde girlfriend. That's just what was normal in 2003. The same way that in the comics, when Invincible would fly various people and hold them awkwardly as he did it, the people would all say, "This is gay." A sort of running joke. Again, a term that was super popular in the early 2000s, but they removed that from the show for obvious reasons today. With William and Amber, maybe those character types worked really well before when the comics first came out, and maybe it's just my opinion, but I just didn't care for them. But in the show, I really felt like they made a significant improvements. This surprisingly welcome change from the source material was a good move to me, but there are other good choices as well, including Omni-Man killing the Guardians of the Globe, where in the comics, it was just a quick 1 to 3 page event, but in the show it was several minutes long and way more brutal. Or slightly changing Rex to make him a more prominent and interesting character, changing the time of when some events happen, the insane finale of the show, and so on. The thing that I think scares people most when something is adapted is not getting the original story right, not staying true to the original vision, but in some special cases, something could be adapted and changed but still work, even possibly be better than the source material. One of the things that impresses me most about the Invincible show is that it's animated, a cartoon with adult content, and it's doing as well as it is. To me, I feel like there's way too much obsession with live action and CGI-filled movies, mostly caused by the Marvel dominance in film and TV for the last few years. But what I was happily surprised by with Invincible is the simplistic yet perfect adaptation from the comics. The success of animated films and TVs can be seen in several examples today. The first and most dominant one comes to mind is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, a movie done in 3D animation with comic-style graphics, speech bubbles, and font sound effects. This movie is personally my favorite Spider-Man movie, and it's because it doesn't have to focus so much on the popular actor to play Peter Parker or Spider-Man. It doesn't need to have over-the-top CGI, or whatever problems might interfere with a big-budget live-action movie. Part of the reason what made Spider-Verse so good was its unique animation style that works so well for a superhero movie. My problem I started to have with Marvel movies over the years was that everything was just becoming fully CGI. You would have these big-name movie actors, but then beside them almost everything was CGI. And it kind of took you away from the experience. Whereas with animation, you know that what you're going to be watching is fully animated, and you don't have to get distracted and confused with real-life actors and an insane amount of fake people, creatures, locations, and more. I thought that since I was getting sick of Marvel movies, that meant I was also getting sick of the superhero genre in general. But I actually still really like the genre. I'm just so sick of these live-action movies. When I found out about an animated superhero show that was originally a comic, created by Robert Kirkman, I was immediately interested because it felt like such a fresh take on something that had gotten so boring. Plus, there's so much extra stuff you can do with animated media. You don't have to worry so much about paying the actors to physically portray these roles, or worry about an extremely expensive CGI budget, etc. You can put all the focus into making something as true to the source material as possible, because it's essentially the same media. Going from comics to 2D animation is so much more rewarding in so many ways, but mostly because it looks so similar. Mark Grayson from the comics can look just like Mark Grayson in the show, because they're both 2D characters. You don't have to worry about casting someone to look as close to the character as possible, or worry about the actors dropping out or needing to be replaced. All you have to worry about is the voice acting, which is a lot less of a worry when dealing with keeping things accurate to the source material. The Invincible show can also do one of the things it does best in the comic books, which is the amount of gore used. Something fairly original when it comes to comics, especially when compared to Marvel and even DC. Sure, there's a lot of comics, and even some mainstream ones, that have a decent amount of blood in them. And not that it's necessary to have the blood and violence, but it really does make Invincible stand out in a way that gives it its own thing, and even caters towards a different audience. Not just for teenagers or the general public, but adults who want to enjoy a specific kind of comic that isn't simply geared for everyone. The blood and violence used in the show is something that can make it stand out. And we can save the violence used in media debacle for another day, but I personally think that when you're mature enough to watch a show like this, and you see some of the episodes where some crazy stuff happens, it's one of those awesome moments in television where you want to talk about that thing that happened in last week's episode, or Invincible is so cool, did you see that fight scene? Or the classic, oh man, that finale though, can you believe that? These scenarios benefit shows and movies so much because with these powerful moments, whatever they might be, it can make it special and not just another show or movie. I thoroughly enjoy when risks are taken in media. And to be fair, even though Invincible was a comic first, and you don't want to upset fans, in today's climate, a lot of people could complain about the violence in the show, saying it's too much or it could corrupt young people or whatever the excuse might be. But instead, the creators of the comic and the show stood true to the original vision of the comic, and even went further in some cases, in a good way too. Another thing I admire most about Invincible's story, and other mediums like it, is the amazing creativity that was put into such an incredible creation. Thinking of all these different characters, backstories, locations, events, and having it all work together is honestly such a skill that I think people can take for granted sometimes. The people that come up with this stuff really are gifted. This goes for both the show and the comic. Most of the comic, since everything comes from it originally, but also being able to see everything come to life through the animation is pretty creatively impressive. A cool thing about this series is that even in a world so populated with various superheroes and universes, from Marvel, DC, and other indie source material, Robert Kirkman and his team were able to create all new characters with original powers, stylized looks, and truly making iconic figures to stand amongst those like Spider-Man and Batman. I'm always amazed today when something new and interesting comes out, because we do kind of live in a world where there's so much copy and pasting being done, in terms of the entertainment world. This is naturally hard to avoid because so much content is being created every single day and has been for so many years now that it's extremely difficult not to try even slightly to revisit a topic already done before, especially when you know that the topic is well received and potentially profitable. When it comes to Invincible, sure, there's a bit of the same trope here and there. You've got your hero's journey story, classic superhero team similar to that of Avengers and Justice League, your bad guys, etc. But I do feel like there's so much extra, out there, and original content in these comics. Not to spoil anything, but so often while reading the comics, things would be happening that I just never would have predicted, and made me so much more invested because I had to see where this craziness led to. So much of the creativity in Invincible has stuck with me to this day. Whenever I think about reading these books for the first time, it's such a nice memory because I was so invested in the story, and I genuinely look forward to reading more every time I stopped. I think this is a goal for every creative. Yes, you want to make money, do something cool, be popular for a bit, but the most important and empowering thing you can do is create something that lasts, that people will always cherish and remember fondly. For those of you that have made it all the way through this video, thank you so much for listening and for watching. I've been wanting to put out this video for months now. I wanted to put it out after I finished the books months ago, after the show was done, but just life got in the way. These things take like a ridiculous amount of time and effort to actually make. The amount of like takes I have to do just to be able to make like the recording sound half decent is time consuming in itself. But I just wanted to say thank you so much to everybody. I haven't put out a video in almost a year, and I don't have like a huge following or whatever, but I do see like all the comments and stuff like that, or the people that watch the videos and say stuff. So I just want to say thanks to everybody, and hopefully I'll be able to put out some more videos soon and get more on like an actual routine. Take care.